guys, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Oh my god, we have so much to talk about today, guys. This episode we are doing a full deep dive on the new Wicked for Good movie. It's Wicked Part 2. If you guys aren't aware, which if you follow me in any capacity, I do not know how you wouldn't be aware of this already, but I am a big Wicked fan. I'm not a huge musical theatre person. I'm one of those people that's like, when I watch it, I'll enjoy it, but I haven't really had a big history of going out of my way to watch musical theatre, and Wicked was one of the first musicals that my best friend Dan introduced me to, and I just kind of fell in love with it. I love the actual musical itself, but more importantly, I just really love the story and what Wicked represents and all of the political themes in it. I have seen it on the West End, and obviously I have seen Wicked Part 1. I don't know how many times I've seen the film Wicked Part 1. Maybe about 10 or 11 now. I saw it 3 times in the cinema, one at a pre-screening before the premiere, and then at the premiere, and then in the cinemas with my dad. I took my dad to see it, and then have continually watched it on Now TV until Wicked Part 2, which I managed to see in a pre-screening the week before it came out, and then I've seen it again in the cinema. So Wicked for Good I have seen twice now, and the second time I went in, I purposely picked a seat at the back of the cinema so I could have my phone out, obviously low brightness, taking notes. There's just so much I wanted to say about this film, and I wanted to make sure that I really got into all the things that I wanted to say. So I have a whole list of notes to get through to chat with you today. They are obviously going to contain spoilers for Wicked for Good. So this is your official spoiler warning for Wicked for Good. If you don't want the spoilers but you still want to know my thoughts, I will give you a very quick spoiler-free screen grab of my basic thoughts. And they are, I really enjoyed this film. I definitely enjoyed it more on the second time around. I think the first time I was just so sort of aghast with emotions because there's just so much going on. And I really feel like in the second watch, I got to take more in and just enjoy the film itself a lot more. And also as well, because the first time I watched it in a screening. And that's one thing I will say about being a creator that goes to screenings and premieres and stuff. I am often worried about how much that skews my perception of a film, especially when you've got the literal cast or people from Universal or A24, whoever it is, if they got representatives in the room, I always think, how much does that actually skew my perception of the film? But then it is also really fun watching it in the pre-screening because, one, you get to see it early, so you get to gather your thoughts a little bit earlier, which makes making content so much easier. But then also as well, it feels so much more acceptable to have, big emotional reactions, which is good for a film like Wicked. At the end of No Good Deed, everyone applauded. Everyone was applauding. But I thought it was a brilliant adaptation from the stage to the screen. I thought it stayed true to the musical while also expanding on some of the points that a musical just can't do because of either time constraints or the spacing and the staging, etc. I think it was a fantastic cast, and I think almost every cast member completely embodied their role. And yes, the one person that I am unfortunately disappointed with in this film is Michelle Yeoh, and I will get more into that later on in the video when we talk about the cast, but Michelle Yeoh really did disappoint in this film for me, and I love Michelle Yeoh. I think she's a legend, and I actually really enjoyed her in Wicked Part 1, but I really do feel like that was the one performance for me where it really did it did let it down. That's the spoiler-free bit done, but for the rest of the episode, I'm going to talk about the film overall. I'm going to go through the general story and my experience watching it. I really want to touch and dive on to the rewriting of the disability storyline with Nessa Rose, because obviously myself being paralysed, being a disabled woman, this is something that I have been so nervous about, and yeah, they really just went ahead and dealt with that head on, and I have so much to say about that. So get into that. I want to talk about the political themes and how relevant the story of Wicked still is today more than ever, and also just some of the criticisms and mixed reviews that I've seen floating about on the internet. Because the film does have mixed reviews. I feel like the first film was very much beloved by almost everyone, but this one seems to have very mixed reviews, and I have thoughts about that, which we will get into. And maybe we'll start with that actually, because the mixed reviews have come out over this weekend. I will say the Rotten Tomato score is still very high. It's lower than Wicked Part 1, but it's still very, very high, and the film is very, very successful. But the reviews seem to be very, very mixed, and people's thoughts seem to be very, very mixed. And I think what I think is interesting to see is that it seems to be groups of people having similar reviews. So when I mean that, I mean everyone that I know who loves Wicked, the stage play, and knows Wicked loved the film and thought it was a brilliant adaptation. There's also people who I know who like Wicked but don't like Act 2 who didn't like the film. And there's also a lot of people who are more, I would say, general population viewers. I know that sounds really condescending when I say that. I don't mean that to say that. It's nice to see that we have some locals in the audience tonight. That's who I'm talking about. People who haven't seen the stage play and don't know the story of Wicked. I've seen quite a few people who would maybe fall into that category, saying that they felt let down by this one and they felt like it was disappointing compared to part 1. And something that I have seen people repeatedly say was that this wasn't fun and there was no bangers, and it just didn't compare to part 1. And look, I will say this before anything I review. You are allowed to not like things. You are allowed to like things. You're allowed to enjoy things. You're allowed to not enjoy things. That's the whole great part about the arts and about any kind of entertainment medium, right? Is everyone's going to have different opinions and everyone watches and enjoys things for different reasons. But I do find it quite hard to grasp that, like, if that is your reasoning, if that specifically is your reasoning why you didn't like it, I do find it quite confusifying of how much attention you were paying during part 1, because even if you didn't know the stage play, surely you were paying enough attention in part 1 to see where the story was going. Yes, part 1 and in the stage play it is as well, it is more light and breezy and there's a lot more comedy and the songs themselves are more, in quotations, bangers. Because yes, the story is setting the seeds of dealing with those very political themes, but it hasn't got to dealing with them head on yet. But by the time that Defying Gravity comes around, you should know where this story is going. If you are really paying attention to the story and not just going along for the ride, I felt like you should have known that this was about to take a bit of a darker turn. And I think the problem is where they've split this into two, for people who don't know the stage show and people who don't know how how this story goes. I think a lot of people just thought this was going to be like another Wicked film or like a continuation or a sequel, but it's not. It's a story in 2 parts, and I really feel like maybe that's where the disconnect is. And it's okay to not like where a story is going. It's okay for you to not like where a film leads you to, but it is just hard to hear people say that, like, they were surprised that this was coming. I think even if you didn't know the story, you knew that this was going to take a darker storyline. But onto the actual film itself, from the opening scene, I loved it. I loved that we got almost forced straight back into the action, and I thought it was really powerful that the very first opening scene was Elphaba fighting head on the animal abuse that was going on in Oz. It put us right back into the centre of the action, and it reminded us not only of where we've been but also what we're fighting for. And it shows us in a way that we really understand. It shows us these animals, I think they were oxes, right? These oxes doing this grueling manual labour, and it basically hands to mouth feeds us. The wizard needs this doing. The wizard needs his yellow brick road, and it's very heavy-handed what it's doing, but I think it's really powerful as an opening scene because it's reminding us what Elphaba is fighting for and what the stakes are. And then obviously we get that really powerful opening scene where she frees the oxes, they run off into the forest, I believe, and then it's that guy running across the tulip fields going, she's back, she's back, she's back. And I think we forget, it's been 4 years. It has been 4 years from Defying Gravity to the opening of Act 2. And in that time, Elphaba has been fighting battles like this and not making very much progress. So after we get shown what Elphaba has been up to, we then get swung across the Emerald City and we see where Glinda and Fiyero have been. And they are knee deep in the propaganda machine. And I absolutely loved the grandeur of it. It was so over the top, but I really think it did a good job to illustrate how heavy-handed the propaganda in Oz is and how much Glinda has been used as a tool of fascism. Because as I said, it has been 4 years since we saw them last, and a lot can happen in 4 years. And I really do think it needed to be in the opening scene, this very over-the-top, very heavy-handed, like almost feeding us hand-to-mouth way of showing us, what they have been doing. Because the last time we saw them, they were students. They were just at university. They were at shiz. And now they're not kids anymore. And I think it's really important that it got that across in the film. And I'll get onto some of the other makeup choices in the film later on. But something I think the makeup team did really, really well was aging the characters, because remember they filmed this at the same time. Even though we are getting the films a year apart, the two movies were filmed at the same time, and the makeup team did a really good job of slightly aging Glinda and Elphaba in a way that was believable. When they're in part one, they do look more baby-faced, particularly Elphaba, the way that her contour is done. They do look more baby-faced. They look more doughy-eyed and, you know, just like in like university students. It comes to Wicked Part 2, and they are grown women now. And you can see that reflected in the makeup that has been done. I thought that was incredible. Now, our first song of part 2 is obviously Thank Goodness in the musical. Now, this is where I also don't understand the criticism of Act 2, is people saying that Act 2 has no bangers. My favourite songs from the whole entire musical are in Act 2. I'm sorry, they just are. I am an Act 2 has the best songs truther. And I'm not ashamed of it. Thank Goodness is actually my favourite song in Wicked. Could I be the only person ever to have said that? Possibly, but I'm going to own it. I just generally think it's such a fantastic, beautiful song. And I think it's so easy to write it off as just like, oh, you know, Glinda being bubbly, Glinda being silly Glinda. But I think when you really look at the song, I'm talking about the Broadway version here, the soundtrack, which if you're watching the video version, you'll see is behind me. But I think when you really listen to that song and when you really look at the lyrics, like, we're really seeing inside of Glinda's heart here, and we're really seeing inside of her brain, which is, you know, it's ticking away in there somewhere, but she's repressing it, she's pushing it down, because I personally, my analysis of Glinda is I think she's too cowardly to act on what she knows is starting to figure out deep inside her brain and in her heart. But I really love Thank Goodness on the Broadway version. And am I disappointed with the way it was done in the movie? Not necessarily. Is it what I wanted? No. Obviously they've broken the song up. And there is a whole verse or like a few lines which is missing. And they were obviously meant to be sung by Madame Morrible, played by Michelle Yeoh. But the thing is, guys, Michelle Yeoh can't sing. She can't. And that's not me being a bitch. Michelle Yeoh, when they actually approached her about the role, she said, I'm not an actress who can sing. She knows this. And I think in part 1 you kind of could forget like the fact that she couldn't sing, and you could kind of forgive it because the rest of her performance was really good, and the way that she could be very cunning and sinister but then also quite caring for Elphaba. There was lots of different levels to her performance in part 1, which I was able to overlook the singing, but in part 2 it was just inexcusable. I'm sorry. I really don't want to be making this criticism because I actually really love Michelle Yeoh. I think she's a legend. And I loved so many parts of her performance, but the fact is that if you're playing Madame Morrible, I just think you should be able to sing. Like, it's like this is a musical after all. She had a few lines in Thank Goodness in the movie version, but they took out the most part of her singing in that. Now, this doesn't just affect the viewer's enjoyment of watching that song. It also does have an effect on the storyline. Not so much for Madame Morrible, but actually for Glinda, because the lines that Madame Morrible sings in that really hold Glinda more accountable for the betrayal of her best friend. So in the movie, they cut her off with Michelle Yeoh's last line being, I have striven to ensure that all of Oz knows the story of your braverism. And then that's the end of it, and it goes back to Ariana Grande. But in the Broadway version, it actually tells a story of what happened that day that Glinda and Elphaba came to the Emerald City. The lines being, the day you were first summoned to an audience with Oz, and although he would not tell you why initially, when you bow before his throne, he decreed you hence be known as Glinda the Good, officially. Then with a jealous squeal, the Wicked Witch burst from concealment where she had been lurking. Oh God, I've got a lisp and I can't say this word. Surreptitiously. And then it goes into the crowd being like, I hear she has an extra eye. And then it goes into the crowd saying, I hear she has an extra eye, which they've kept that bit in. So they've cut out most of Michelle Yeoh's verse there. And in that, and I personally think that verse there does a lot more to incriminate Glinda as being complicit in the framing of Elphaba as the Wicked Witch. It does a lot more to make her accountable for betraying her best friend. And so by taking this out, if it is because Michelle Yeoh didn't have the vocals to sing it, it also does rewrite a bit of Ariana Grande's character, but I do feel like they had done that consistently throughout the film. The film does seem to have a lens of being more sympathetic to Glinda and painting her as more naive. Don't get me wrong, I don't think she's completely innocent in the film, but I do think she has less accountability than in the stage play. And by taking out that part of Madame Morrible's verse, deliberate or not, it does do that. But then that being said, Michelle Yeoh can't sing. And look, would I have rather them stuck to the song exactly as I love it, but have Michelle Yeoh do it with her current skill base? No, I am glad that they've kind of adapted it, because I would rather her just not do it if she can't do it. Do you know what I mean? That being said, I think Ariana Grande absolutely killed Thank Goodness. Of course she did. I think she really did the song justice, and I think she managed to really hit all of those layers that I love about the song. I particularly love the way that there's that part of the song where it really feels like she's starting to break through, she's starting to crack and show her inner thoughts, and she's starting to really let the clogs tick in her mind, and it's almost like time slows down for her, and they shot that in a particular way to show that as well. If you watch the film, you can see that the confetti is almost in slow motion around her. While she's saying the words, I couldn't be happier, though it is, I admit, the tiniest bit unlike I anticipated, but I couldn't be happier, I simply couldn't be happier. Well, not simply, because getting your dreams, it's strange but it seems a little well complicated. There's a kind of sort of cost, that a couple of things get lost. There are bridges, oh, this is my favourite line, guys. There are bridges you cross you didn't know you crossed until you've crossed. I mean, first of all, that's a mouthful. And as well as just being a beautiful line and beautifully delivered by Ariana Grande and her vocals as well, I think it does so much to sum up Glinda getting everything that she wants, but at the same time stumbling into being a part of this fascist regime. And not just as a passive member as well, she is the poster girl for it. And Ariana's performance here, she did such a good job of portraying Glinda's almost, almost fight to convince herself that, happy is what happened when your dreams come true, right? I've got everything I wanted. Why wouldn't I be happy? And it's so juxtaposition to Fiyero in that scene when she pulls him aside and when they have that private conversation, which is so funny because they're having this deeply private conversation in front of the crowd. They are just behind a wall, obviously. And he's saying to her, look, I will go, let's go, me and you now, run. We're in too deep, we are. He is ready to go at that point. But Glinda is not there. But I loved watching these two interact throughout the films, but particularly in this part, because I think you can really see the friction between these two characters and what is eventually going to be their demise. And watching them throughout this whole entire scene, all I could think about was, do you guys remember that interview that before Princess Diana and Charles got married, they did that interview where they announced their engagement, and the interviewer was like, oh, you guys look like really in love. And he goes, yes. Whatever in love means. That's really what this whole scene was given for me. And I think it's pretty obvious way before now that Ariana Grande was just born to play Glinda, and she has proved every single person that doubted her wrong. I remember when I took my dad to see part 1, and my dad doesn't know anything about Wicked. Like, he knows that it's loosely related to the Wizard of Oz. That's all he knew about it. And I was like, oh yeah, Ariana's playing Glinda. And he just thought like, oh, it's just a pop star, big name they've brought in to sell the movie. He didn't know anything about the Ariana Wicked lore. He didn't know about Wicked in general. And after watching it, he was like, wow, that woman is committed. Like, she clearly was here for the role and is not just a pop star to sell the film. And I think she's proved it in so many ways throughout her performance, but particularly watching Thank Goodness, I just couldn't help but think about how much this role means to her and how she's really not hidden that. And in that scene in particular, it really reminded me of when she won Women of the Year in 2019 from Billboard, and she got up on that stage and she made that speech, something along the lines of like, this year has been one of the best years in my career, but in my personal life, I really don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And it was after she'd been through so much, obviously, the horrific incident that happened in Manchester, and then going through everything that followed after with losing Mac and then breaking off the engagement, and just she has just been through so much. And I just can't help but think how much of her must be able to relate to Glinda in this in the sense that Glinda feels like she has to be a public figure and she has to show up and be encouraging for the people. And there must have been times throughout Ari's career where she has felt like she has had to do that too, particularly after the awful incident in Manchester as well, where she came back, what was it, like less than a month later, and did the One Love concert. I just can't imagine the strength that must have took from her. And I can really see those elements of what we as the public know Ari has been through and what she has been able to push through and give to us as her fans and give to us as the public while suffering so much. And I really saw so much of that in her portrayal of Glinda and who we know Glinda to be as a character. And I felt like it really gave Glinda's character much more depth. Something else I spotted in that scene as well, where they had the two posters of the Good Witch, the Bad Witch, and Elphaba as the Bad Witch, the Wicked Witch. And I love the reference to the original Wizard of Oz in the posing that the Wicked Witch does, where she's doing the typical Wicked Witch pose. I thought that was a really, really good way to reference the original film there. And as layered and beautiful as that scene was, oh my God, when one of the guys, was it a Munchkin guy, gave her the last piece of the yellow brick road to put in, I generally thought he'd given her a wheel of cheese. I was like, why is he giving Glinda a bit of brie? Do you know what I mean? I was like, what is he doing? And then when she put it in the ground, I was like, oh, yellow brick road. As I was saying earlier, there are several things they've done throughout the film. I think personally they have done to give Glinda less accountability for her role in framing Elphaba as the Wicked Witch. You'll notice throughout the film that there are several points where she is shielded from a lot of the work that Madame Morrible does. And you see it in this film where Elphaba flies in and writes hours of lies on the screen. In the screen. Oh my God, I'm so chronically online. In the sky, Sophie, in the sky. And Madame Morrible actually shields Glinda. She hides her from looking at it before she changes the message. So Glinda only sees Die Oz. She doesn't actually see Elphaba's original message. And so in her mind, she could be thinking, well, 4 years have gone by now. Maybe this is who Elphaba is now. It's not the Elphaba that I knew, but she is up there writing Die Oz in the sky. And I feel like something that the film did, which it was able to do more because the stage show only has, so much capability to do this, but it was able to have those little moments where it really tugged at the tension between the two characters more. But that's the great thing is when you're working with a film is you do have those opportunities to get right close up more. You've got more screen time, but you've also got more room literally in the scene to get right up in the characters' faces and show more. Like we did with the Oz Dust. We were able to get right in Elphaba's face and see her cry and see that emotion. And that's one of the things that you can do with film, which you just cannot do with the stage. And they did it with this film in a few different ways. And in one way they did it to add more depth to Glinda, was they added in that scene where you see her as a child and you literally see her be taught that to be loved is the most important thing in the world. And so it becomes obvious kind of why Glinda is the way that she is. And as I said before, this doesn't mean that she's not accountable for the way that she's behaved and the way she's portrayed her friend, but the film does give us more explanation into why Glinda is the way that she is. And it's actually reminiscent of the way, I don't know, I feel like a lot of girls are even unintentionally raised in today's world where we're taught that to be lovable and to even just to be likeable, God, to be palatable is the most important thing in the world. And I think it's only now that I'm in my late 20s, nearly 30 next year, I'm starting to unlearn a lot of those things. And I'm learning that it's okay to be unlikable. And, I don't have to be palatable in so many different ways. And so while it was a bit more extreme for Glinda's case because she ended up becoming a poster girl for fascism, it is something that I think a lot of women around the world, in the real world, can relate to. Now, speaking of the film being able to do things that the stage show couldn't, this film at part 2 gave us 2 new songs. Guys, I knew there was going to be 2 new songs over a year ago. When I went to that first, the really exclusive screening before even the London premiere last year, I was told by one of my friends who was on the PR team for that film that there was going to be 2 new songs. And I remember me and Dan looking at each other being like, if you guys aren't watching the video version of this podcast, my mouth was a gasp. But I didn't hear those songs until I saw the movie, and I was not disappointed. I think Elphaba's new song is definitely the stronger one of the two for me. I don't dislike Girl in the Bubble, and I think it does a lot to actually bridge the narrative of where Glinda comes to at the end of the movie. But I do just think No Place Like Home is musically a stronger song. And not only is it just an incredible song and a really heartwarming song, it does so much to enhance the political themes of the story. Because Wicked is inherently political. I've been talking about this a few times on my stories. I was talking about the other day on Instagram about how it's quite funny, but not funny, how relevant the story of Wicked was during the Bush administration when it first came out on Broadway, and how it's still relevant today with, the ICE raids that are going on over in the US, but also with the far right rising over here, and a lot of the fear mongering and everything that has been happening all over the world. But I just, particularly speaking for someone who lives in the UK, who's grown up in the UK, I've always lived in England, and I feel very disillusioned with where the UK currently is, personally. I mean, I don't feel hopeful for the world in general, but particularly living in England, I feel very disillusioned with the country. I think there is so much that I love about this country, and I really do. I know a lot of the time I'm like, oh, I hate England, I hate this and I hate that. And a lot of that comes from knowing the history of my country, and not just knowing the history, but also knowing how much we're responsible for that we have buried and not owned up to, and we've rewrote history and we've wrote ourselves as the victors in a lot of circumstances. And there's a lot of complicated feelings, around growing up in England, but there is so much about this country that I love and that I loved growing up in, and I can feel myself getting emotional. I think particularly in the time that I was growing up, for the most part anyway, it felt like things were improving somewhat. It felt like there was hope. And it really felt like, I remember multiculturalism being a really beautiful, embraced thing. And it does seem like now we are a place, as Elphaba says in the song, that is devolving. It really does. And I felt like that for a while in this country, but particularly more so than ever this year. It just seems like we're so divided. And intentionally as well, we're intentionally divided. And when I heard this new song in the Wicked movie, I was literally crying my eyes out in the film. I knew I was going to cry at this film because For Good. I knew For Good was going to make me pull my eyes out, but I didn't know this song was coming, and I didn't expect to cry my eyes out. And I have cried in my second viewing, and I have cried listening to it at home since, because it just really, really hits home, literally. And the lyrics that I find that hit really deep personally for me are, when you feel you can't fight anymore, just tell yourself there's no place like home. When you feel it's not worth fighting for, compel yourself, because there's no place like home. When you want to leave discouraged and resigned, that's what they want you to do. But think how you will grieve for all you leave behind. Oz belongs to you too. Those who would take it from you spout a lie to sell yourself. You go their way or go. It's them we'll keep defeating if we keep on repeating there's no place like home. Guys, I have actual tears in my eyes. That's beautiful. And I think it worked really, really well in the film, and it was very literal in the film as she was trying to persuade the animals not to leave. But I literally was sat there in the film feeling really empowered, and I felt really reminded of what I love about my country and what I love about, the majority of the people here. And hatred and division and racism has not just, suddenly swept upon England this year. I'm not naive to that. We have such a long, complicated history of it, and with colonialism, but it feels like more so this year, people are going more out of their way and are more intentionally trying to make certain people feel unwelcome here. And I think to hear this song and to be reminded of, England belongs to you too, and how there is a home here for you that's worth fighting for. It doesn't belong to the people who claim that it does. It belongs to all of us. It's just so beautiful. It really, really is. It works really well in the film, but more importantly, it works really well for real life. And I'm really glad that they didn't shy away from this political messaging of Wicked, because I think it would have been really easy to forget this and abandon this completely and focus more on the love triangle, which, don't get me wrong, they do obviously honour that part of the story, although in my mind, like, they are a throuple. I'm sorry, like there has never been a better advertisement for a throuple than those three, is there? Jesus Christ. But I think it would have been really easy to shy away from the political messaging of Wicked and to make it this sanitised version of it, and I'm really glad that they didn't do that, because it is needed now more than ever. Because you can look to loads of different countries and you can see where the story of Wicked is relevant to that individual country's politics. But what seems to be quite universal is the idea of making someone the villain, someone having to be good and someone having to be bad. And just speaking as someone who has lived in England my whole life, we have seen it with so many different groups of people. It was happening for years to immigrants and asylum seekers, and it still is. It started to happen to trans people more aggressively than ever, and more so this year. The attack seems to have started to include disabled people as well. And I think it's really important that we remember, and I think it's really important that we ask ourselves, what do certain people, aka the wizard, get from making someone a villain? What does it distract from? What does it cover up? And as well done as these themes are in the film and in the stage play as well, it does just make me laugh how there are, I mean, it's not funny, but it does make me laugh how there are people on the right wing who are quite literally clueless that this play is about them. Like, is this play about us? Is this fucking play about us? Yes, it is, but not in the way that they think it is. Like, I remember seeing a load of people being like, yeah, Donald Trump is Elphaba, and, like, the Democrats are the wizards. And it's like, no, baby, no. Like, yes, the play is about you, but not like that. Like, are you kidding me? You are the wizard. And jumping forward slightly in my notes here, but I think it's important to tie this into the song Wonderful, which I think is one of the most important songs throughout both acts for the theme of this film and the stage play. And Jeff delivered it really, really beautifully in his very, very unique way, as he always does. But it was a stroke of genius to bring Ariana Grande in as Glinda for Wonderful. It really added another layer to it, which was very, very sinister. And it did more to build around just how well oiled the propaganda machine is. Because the wizard knows that Elphaba is very headstrong. She is very determined, and she can't be bought in ways that someone like Glinda could. But he knows that she is tired, and she does miss her friend. History will say they were good friends. The wizard knows all of this. And so while you could argue that Glinda genuinely thinks that she is just trying to reach a resolution for the betterment of everyone and to make her own life a little bit easier and to get her friend back, she is being used to manipulate Elphaba. And I don't think Elphaba alone would have been persuaded by the wizard, but with Glinda, yeah, I generally reckon she could have been, and she was in the film, because not only is she tired and she misses her friends, she generally does see the good in Glinda. She knows that there's a lot of messiness and a lot of complicated stuff around that, but she does generally see the good in Glinda's heart. And there's a really chilling lyric, I think, there where they're saying, obviously, wonderful, he's wonderful. And the wizard says, you'll make me wonderful, because he knows the power of being able to use Elphaba. Something that I also thought was really, really cool is in this scene, you know, where Glinda disappears behind the cape, and then she runs in through the door further down the room. That was actually done in real time. I think they might have edited her out vanishing behind the cape, and then she runs through a back door, and then she runs in on time on her cue. And I really, really love that, because one, I thought that is just so well timed and speaks so much to the performance that they were, you know, really dedicated to, but also because it really makes it feel like theatre, which is a great homage to where this story originates from. But going back to this particular part of the film, where just before this we get the reunion of Elphie and Glinda. It's been 4 years since they've seen each other, and I think you can really see this in the way they look at each other when they finally meet again. It's in the eyes, it's just like this longing, and honestly, I forget that Fiyero is meant to be the love interest in this. Like, Canonically, okay, fine, hell, I'll tell you the sexuality of everyone in Wicked. I'll tell you now. You know there's only one person who can tell you what you are. No, me, Sue Sylvester. Glinda is a closeted, comp-het lesbian. That is a lesbian if I ever saw one, and trust me, I see one every day. Fiyero is bisexual. I'm sorry, that needs no explanation. Did you see his performance in Dancing for Life? Thank you very much. Elphie, also bisexual. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. We've jumped a little bit around on my notes here. I was trying to stay in the flow of how things happen chronologically in the movie, but we've jumped a little bit around here. But I'm going to jump back now to talk a little bit about, I say a little bit, a lot, about Nessa Rose, played by the brilliant Marissa Bodie. Absolutely incredible. And what I think is mind-blowing really is that throughout the over 20 years that this story has been being portrayed on stage, she is the first wheelchair user to play Nessa Rose, and I think that's really reflective on how they managed to deal with this story. As I said, I've always been a fan of Wicked, but the way that they deal with Nessa's disability and Act 2 as a wheelchair user, as a disabled woman myself, has always made me feel uncomfortable. And I remember before the first time I ever went to see it, my friend Dan, who has known the story way years beyond what I did, he got me into it. I remember him saying hey, so there's a disability storyline in it and it's quite outdated to, sort of disability politics. And I remember him saying, I don't think it's going to ruin the show for you, but heads up, that's coming. And it was jarring to see it, I won't lie. And it is one of those things which always just kind of felt a bit icky about the show for me. And I knew that they were going to make changes when it came to the film. I just didn't know how they were going to deal with it. But I did have faith in the way that they were going to deal with it, because I feel like John M. Chu and Universal Pictures have made such a good example here of how to make the industry more accessible. They have consistently given Marissa Bodie the platform to talk about the accessibility she needs and requires as an actress. They have consistently shown how to work with Marissa Bodie as a disabled actress in a way that obviously supports her in the way that she needs, but also that enhances the performance and makes the storytelling more authentic. There's some really good behind the scenes clips where you can kind of watch Marissa Bodie's day in the life, where you literally see her go to the set in the accessible cab, and it's just so nice to see someone get such a huge role and to see the way that it's been made accessible for them. And it made me just feel really warm inside, because I'm seeing her getting into a black London cab and I'm like, oh my god, that's how I get to work. And it's just really nice to see it in a way that I've never ever seen before. There will be so many people, especially young kids, where this might be their first time ever seeing disability, and what a cool way to have it represented. Now obviously the character is quite morally grey and has layers, but so do humans, so do people, and disabled people are people. And I just think it's such a layered and more nuanced way of portraying disabled people than what we've had for years. I grew up in the era of Lou and Andy on Little Britain, and I will still get trolls in my comment section be like, lol, Lou and Andy core, or people who don't know me to be like, oh, Lou and Andy, and joke that I'm faking it. The damage that bad disability representation has had on the disabled community is going to take more than just this role to undo it, but I think it's such a fantastic start. But this particular bit that they've kind of rewrote, and they only ever so slightly, not so much that it really changes the plot at all. So what happens in the stage show is Elphaba enchants the shoes and Nessa gets up and walks, and then I think it carries on the way that it does. But instead of her getting up to walk, the way that they deal with it in the film to be more sensitive to this is Nessa actually flies. She levitates. And the crucial change here is that she doesn't ask Elphaba to cure her of her disability. She's not asking her to fix her physically and to make her walk and to make her able-bodied. She asks her to take her back to that feeling that she had when she was at university, when she felt loved, when she felt wanted. And that's a very human experience. You can relate to that whether you are able-bodied or not. And she does that, and we see Nessa float out of the chair and she's flying, levitating in the sky because she's high. She's high on life. She feels great. And it's such a simple change that I think if you didn't know the theatre show, you probably wouldn't think much of it. But it's just such a more sensitive way of dealing with that issue, because instantly you've switched the lens of the disability being the problem. I thought it was a great way to handle what had previously been quite an ableist part of the story, to make it more in line with the social model of disability, but also to make it more human and more heartfelt. But while we're on the topic of ableism and Nessa Rose as well, I think we need to talk a little bit about the internet and the world's kind of weird reaction to her. I don't know if you guys have seen very much of this, but I have seen some people be really weird about Marissa Bodie's character. Not so much Marissa Bodie herself, but the character Nessa. Nessa is a morally grey character. She's not a goodie. She's not necessarily inspirational. She's not a particularly great sister to Elphaba. She essentially becomes a dictator. She's very, very morally grey. And I think that's very confusifying for people because they're like, this is not my usual inspiring disabled character. And it becomes almost like, oh, well, okay, so she's actually the villain. She's actually the Wicked Witch, which she's not. Nessa is not wicked. She is not evil. She is flawed, yes, but it is too simple. It is too two-dimensional to just call her wicked. And that is the whole point of the entire story. But I do think we see this in a lot of media when we have disabled characters, is the second that the disabled character becomes a little bit flawed and a little bit morally grey, it's so much easier to cast them as the villain in our minds. I remember in season, God, what was it, 2 or 3 of Sex Education, where the guy who's the wheelchair user deletes the confession of love text from Otis to Maeve. And I saw so many people on Twitter making jokes and memes and like about how they hope the next season opens with him getting thrown out of his wheelchair and stuff like that. And it's like, whoa. How did we jump to that? Like, you are allowed to not like a character. You are allowed to find a character annoying. You are allowed to think a character is a bad person. But if you feel all of those things and you immediately jump to, I want to harm them and belittle them and their mobility aid, then you have some ableism that you need to unpack. Because that's very weird. And I unfortunately have seen a lot of that surrounding Nessa Rose and Marissa Bodie. And funnily enough, I haven't seen any of it actually directed at Marissa Bodie herself. But what people don't understand is that if you are saying it about Nessa, you are saying it about Marissa Bodie. If you are saying it about Marissa Bodie, you are saying it about me. If you are saying it about me, you are saying it about another wheelchair user. Because the second you start to become desensitized to violence against someone who is disabled, it reflects upon the whole community and it makes the whole community vulnerable. And Nessa Rose might not be a real person, but Marissa Bodie is. And I think we just really need to be able to have these layered, nuanced conversations about characters and their flaws without jumping immediately to ableism. But hey, I'm not surprised because we don't have enough representation as it is. People are only just getting used to seeing disabled people on the screen. When I went for my second screening, there was a few teenage girls in front of me and they were laughing when Nessa was like in the storm before the house hit her. They were just laughing when they saw the chair on screen. And I was just thinking like, wow, it is so foreign to us to see disability on screen in this way that it's instantly laughable for some people. And I'm really, really glad that we didn't get to see the classic image of Nessa Rose's legs sticking out of the house. Because one, I thought that would have been quite tasteless, and I think given how much ableism I've seen around Nessa's character, I'm glad there wasn't more fuel for the fire, to be honest with you. I have seen some people comment, and I've seen people literally comment on like TikToks and posts about Nessa Rose as a character being like, oh, I'm gutted we didn't get to see her legs at the house and blah, 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 blah. And it is like crazy to me, and it's really scary how you can be engaged with this film and this story and the message and the heart of it, but yet still be so quick to devalue disabled people and our bodies. It's just really so funny to me that so many of you be thinking you're Elphaba, but really you're Glindas. And some of you are Madame Morables. But no, I really like the changes that they made to that part of the script, and I feel like it was only really subtle, but it did such a good job of healing what is an icky part in a great story. Nessa Rose, a morally grey character. I'm not gonna lie, guys. When Boq breaks up with her and she just full blown becomes a dictator and makes it illegal for him to leave, I realised in that moment that I could always be doing more. It inspired me a little bit. I mean, hey, that's my favourite dictator. Hey, Nessa Rose, my favourite dictator. She's a cutie patootie, and she's just doing what she's got to do. This part of the story. Now we come on to a topic which I am really intrigued to hear everyone's opinions on, because I feel like my opinions so I'm going to talk about Boq, right? And I feel like my opinions around Boq, I thought were more just sort of, I thought we were all in the same boat. The more time I've spent on socials over the last few days since the movie came out, I'm realising that there are some takes going around on Boq which I for me, like, they're so alien. I don't understand where you guys are getting this information or making these takes from. So let's jump into Boq. Now, I will say, Ethan Slater's performance of Boq is the one that surprised me the most. I knew Ariana Grande was going to eat. I knew Cynthia Erivo was going to eat. I knew Jonathan Bailey was going to eat, but I didn't know anything about Ethan Slater before the Wicked films. So I just, didn't know anything about him, and he absolutely ate his role up in part 2. He really did. And not only did he do it so well, he made me actually sympathize with Boq and really see the horror in what happened to him. He completely changed my perspective. Like, I used to listen to March of the Witch Hunters from the Broadway soundtrack, and it would really, really annoy me. Like, I used to just find him really whiny and annoying. But Ethan Slater managed to show us, and the way that, John M. Chu shot the film, they managed to show us that what happened to him was really horrifying. And I loved that they got in the Shining reference as well. It really just added to the absolute terror that was going on by this point in the film. But this point in the film, right, so the man has been segregated. He's not allowed to leave Munchkinland. He has been held hostage, he has been terrorised, and he has been physically mutilated beyond repair. What happens to him is horrifying. And yet I'm seeing people on the internet call him an incel. On a more hilarious note, they are calling him a tincel. And I have to say, you guys ate with that one. That's fucking hilarious. I'm sorry, you just did. But I don't understand this discourse or where this take is coming from that Boq is an incel. And I think it's a very, I was going to say chronically online take to come to. And I think it's one that is, I don't know, maybe it's just a very easy comparison to make to what's currently going on in our own sort of social world right now. But I don't think Boq falls into that category of being an incel. I really don't. I've seen people saying that he's been red-pilled. I don't think he's been red-pilled. What he goes through is horrifying. And I think two things can be true at once. Elphaba cannot be this wicked witch, this awful character that the wizard makes her out to be. We can accept that that is propaganda and that that's not true. But also, we can also accept that Elphaba is not the only victim of that propaganda. And I think Boq is another victim of this propaganda state. And I think that is how propaganda and fascism works in real life. There's not only one victim to it. There are multiple different victims to varying different degrees for varying different reasons. Now the lion, however, can fuck off. I generally think the lion is this red-pilled man that you think Boq is. Because the lion was obviously taught from a really young age that Elphaba is evil. Elphaba is the wicked witch. And Elphaba is the reason why you are the way that you are, she's the reason that you are cowardly. He was taught that from a very young age. He's obviously been initiated into this way of thinking. And he genuinely believes it, and he blames Elphaba for it, so much so that he interrupted her beautiful high note on No Place Like Home. That's another thing as well. I feel like they made a big thing about Carmen Domingo playing the lion, and he had 3 lines. I generally forgot when I was watching the film that he played the lion, not because his performance wasn't good or underwhelming, but just because there was so little of him. I don't know, because obviously it was an animated performance, we didn't actually physically see him. He literally had so little lines that I actually just kind of forgot it was him. Moving forward now to the wedding. Guys, when I tell you, it breaks my heart to think about Ariana filming this wedding scene and recording I'm not that girl reprise while going through a real life divorce herself. I am a bit parasocial when it comes to Ariana Grande. I'm sorry, like, I grew up with that woman. I did. And the idea of her going for a real life divorce while performing that is really, really sad. But she ate that. She did. She ate the performance. And I particularly love the way they shot this, where they showed it, because you had the parallels of them walking down two different aisles. So you had Glinda obviously walking down this beautiful butterfly lit wedding aisle to Fiyero, and then you had Elphaba walking her aisle, her chosen path, which is this hidden room in the wizard's room. What is it? The wizard's cave. Well, I think that's what I wanted to say there. She's trying to free the animals, okay? She discovers all of these caged animals, and you see them walking these two different aisles, and I think it demonstrates so beautifully the two different paths that these women have taken. And obviously we have Jonathan lead them at the aisle Bailey. Because if I had 3 nickels for every time Jonathan Bailey played a role where he left someone at the aisle, I'd have 3 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened 3 times now. Literally happened in Bridgerton, literally happened in Company, the theatre show that he did, happened in Bridgerton, and now it's happened in Wicked as well. And obviously we're going to come on to Elphaba faking her death and the trapdoor and all of that stuff, because I've seen so much confusion about that. So I don't want to feel like I'm mansplaining the film, but I'm going to mansplain a little bit because some people are a little bit confused. But I think it's really important to note that even here at this part of the film where they find Elphaba literally choking the wizard out, and Fiyero says, quick, fetch as much water as you can, it's reinforcing that idea that everyone believes that water is going to kill Elphaba. So make note of that. Make note of that. It is referenced there as well. Even though Fiyero himself knows this isn't true. Like back to the start of the film, when during Thank Goodness, when they say, I hear her soul is so unclean that water can melt her. And his line is, people are so empty-headed they will believe anything. Fiyero knows this isn't true, but still he sends the guards off to fetch as much water as they can carry. It's a distraction, so he can run away with Elphaba. But it's still reinforcing that he's playing into that idea because it's good for it, because they're going to use it later. Maybe at this point in the story he doesn't know that yet, but it's important for us as the viewers to know that the groundwork for that has been set. We move on to As Long As You're Mine, which is one of my favourite songs throughout the whole musical. It is so sexy, and they managed to make it even sexier. How did they do that? I know that there was a lot of people complaining that there wasn't the transition from I'm Not That Girl into As Long As You're Mine, and I do love that when I'm listening to the Broadway musical soundtrack. But this is the thing, and I said this about Frankenstein in my review, right? Like, guys, that original media isn't going anywhere. If you really like the original transition, you can still go listen to it. Like, just because there's a new adaptation of something doesn't mean that the original becomes null and void, or we're destroying it, or it's now lost media. It's like how people are saying that, like, oh, Guillermo del Toro wasn't faithful to the book in his adaptation of Frankenstein. It's like, yeah, because that's his adaptation. Things are going to be different. If you like the way things were done before, you can still read the old book. You can still listen to the old audiobook. Or if you liked the transition before, you can still listen to the Broadway transition. Because I think even though it was disappointing to not get the transition, they made it even sexier by having that build up. And I feel like we needed that slower build in the film because it's been so long since Elphaba and Fiyero have seen each other. Like, not just for them it's been 4 years, yes, but for us, we've not seen them on screen together in a very long time. And we need to be reminded of that bond that they had created by the end of the first film. Especially for someone like me, who in my head, I forget that they're love interest, to be honest with you, because I'm just like, oh my god, yay, a film about the lesbian witches. No, like, I have to physically be reminded that Fiyero is the love interest, because it's always going to be about the Yuri for me. And I thought it was shot really well with Elphaba getting into a little ratty-ass sex cardigan. The idea of, like, the animals that she was sheltering with fixing her up this little sex cardigan is fucking hilarious to me. Also, it really looks like the blanket that I have in my living room, and I might just have to start, like, I don't know, prancing around the communal areas in it. Gonna have my little as long as. And I was saying to one of my friends the other day, I was like, how nice is it to see an openly gay man get to be the world's, first of all, he gets to be the world's sexiest man, the sexiest man alive, but also he also gets to be soft and sensitive and sweet, and he's done like the CBBS, like kids bed reading time storytelling element, and it's really nice to see an openly gay man get to have these levels and these nuance to him. And obviously we know as humans that people do have nuance, like we know that, but I feel like for a lot of the time, especially for gay men, it has been a case before in media of once you are an out high profile gay man, if you're going to be sexual, then you're going to be highly sexualized, or you either have to be squeaky clean and be like family friendly, and it's almost a little bit like the gay man's version of the Madonna and the whore. And it's really nice to see Jonathan Bailey get to just be in all of his layers and all of his nuance. It's really, really just lovely to see. Back to the film and my lesbians, I did just find it fucking hilarious how Elphaba's sister has literally just been killed, and she shows up to the site of where said sister has been killed and immediately starts fighting with her lesbian situationship. Like, I'm sorry, the way she was smiling when Glinda was taking the piss out of her laugh, that's a lesbian situationship. And trust me, I know one when I see one. I know her and Nessa, their relationship was pretty much done after she turned her captive boyfriend into a teapot. But also, you shouldn't be that happy at the sight of her death. That's what Yuri will do to a woman. That is what toxic Yuri will do to a woman. Obviously, this scene, being quite comedic as it is where they're fighting, it does escalate very, very quickly. And it escalates into Fiero's death. It really escalates. And one of the scenes which I actually really, really love, and it happens in the musical where Fiero pulls a gun on Glinda and threatens to kill Glinda. We know he's not actually going to kill Glinda because even though they may have outgrown each other or grown at different paces, and it's clear that there wasn't that romantic love with them, I think even before Fiero ran away with Elphaba, because remember, at the end of the first act, Glinda says, I don't even think he's perfect anymore and I still want him. I genuinely think Glinda just wants him because that is a part of the image of herself and the life that she has been told that she should have and that she should want. It's very compulsive heterosexuality. And I think Fiero is obviously in love with Elphaba. I mean, hey, we all are, aren't we? But I think despite that, he still does generally care for Glinda. And I think you can really see that in the look they share when Fiero has pulled the gun on her. And as I was saying, that does happen in the musical. That does happen in the stage play where Fiero pulls the gun on Glinda and threatens to shoot her unless they let Elphaba go. But what we are able to see in the film, similar to the Ozdas Ballroom, is we're able to see the close-up reactions. We're able to see those finite little reactions in the face. And I really, really loved how Glinda literally stepped into the gun, because I think she genuinely knew Fiero wouldn't hurt her. She understood what was going on in that moment. She understood the bond between Fiero and Elfie, and she understood it because, one, I think she felt it too. She also loved Elphaba. Wherever you are, like a lesbian truther like me, where you think like, oh, they fancy each other, or whether you just accept that they had a really powerful friendship, it's undeniable that Glinda really loved Elphaba. And I think in that moment she really understood what Fiero was doing, and I don't think she was mad, and I don't think she was scared, and I think that's why we saw her literally step into the gun and the gun was to her face. Now we come to the best part of the whole entire fucking film. No good deed. No good deed. No good deed goes unpunished. Guys, when I tell you, I knew this was going to be good. No Good Deed, again, hey, look, one of my favourite songs from the musical. I knew it was going to be good with Cynthia Erivo's magic onto it, because she just turns everything she touches into gold. But even I was left stunned. When I saw this in the pre-screening, the whole cinema was literally clapping and cheering and whooping, and they were fairly quiet throughout the majority of the film, because obviously most of this film is quite serious, so people were really just paying attention, and this was the first time that people really just started clapping and were just in awe. It was incredible. What she was able to do with this song is already a very, very powerful song, and she was able to just take it to that next level somehow. And she managed to capture all of those different layers of emotions that Elphaba would have been feeling in that song. Because yes, it is a song about frustration and saying, you know, fuck it, no good deed goes unpunished. I'm not even going to pretend anymore, and I'm giving up in a sort of way and giving into that rage. But it's also a song of fear and sadness and grief, because when she screams Fiyero, she is seeing Fiero's dead body. You need to remember that that is a reaction to her seeing Fiero's dead body, which is really fucking dark. And I love the way that they did this, the way that they showed it in the film. Because obviously we see her at the castle with the monkeys, and we get the flames and we get the dramatics, but we also get that more intimate look back through Elphaba's memory, where she's starting to even doubt herself. She's starting to doubt everything she's been fighting for. Things that not only she has spent 4 or 5 years of her life fighting for, but that she threw everything away for. She's questioning everything. And I think obviously this is a very dramatic and high tense situation, but I feel we can all relate to that, where we've looked back at like parts of our memories, and we've scanned memories in our own brain and throughout our whole life, where we've looked back and we've really doubted why we did certain things and the reason behind the reason behind our actions. And the film shows us all of the different ways that Elphie has tried to overthrow this fascist government. Starting with trying to get the general population on side. That didn't work because they were able to misskew and misrepresent her message. Like at the start of the film, where they changed what she wrote in the sky. She can't get the message clearly to the people. She acknowledges that. Then she tries to work with the wizard directly, like in Wonderful, and she concedes and she says, okay, but these are my conditions. That doesn't work. She continues to lose more and more, to the point where she is then just full of rage. And we then get this point by the end of No Good Deed, where she said, right, okay, I'm going to let anger and fury and rage lead the path on this cause. And eventually, that doesn't work either. That nearly ends in her death. And we're going to come on to it in a bit, but I think what the film does really well is it shows all of these different ways of trying to overthrow this power, trying to overthrow this propaganda, and showing that all of these ways just don't work when you don't have the power of the state on your side. And the story kind of ends on this kind of grey area, where the message that the story kind of ends on really is that you can only really overthrow the power when you have someone like Glinda, someone who is less impacted, someone who is more privileged, concede and start to overthrow the power, rather than being faces for them and rather than working with them. And I think March of the Witch Hunters is again where Ethan really, really shines. I keep thinking back to that look he gave up to Glinda when she's on the balcony. Honestly, what an image, that look he gave her. And I don't even think, obviously her reaction, she looks horrified. I don't even think she recognises him. I don't think she knows that's Boq. But I think for her, the horror comes from seeing this mob. And I think for the first time, she's really realising how high the stakes are, and she's really realising the danger that Elphaba is in. Not only that, I think it could be the moment where the weight of her responsibility and the weight of her accountability finally lands on her. And that makes sense because we see her retreat back into her room, back into her castle, and that's where we get Girl in the Bubble. And the first thing I thought when she shut those windows is I thought, damn, Glinda has got amazing double glazing. Like, she could not hear a thing. It reminds me of those TikToks I see of the people that live around Wembley Stadium, and they've got such incredible double glazing that when there's a concert on in the stadium and they close their windows, they can't hear it. Incredible. We get Girl in the Bubble. Obviously, I spoke about his song. I think it's a good song. I think it does more to give Glinda more nuance, more layers, and to elevate that part of the story and bridge where she's currently been to where we're going to see her go to. But more powerful than that, I love the scene with her and Michelle Yeoh. And this, for me, is where Michelle Yeoh actually really shines in this film. Obviously, I've been quite critical of her performance, but I really love this scene where she essentially tells Glinda, as she does in the stage show as well, you've got what you wanted. I can see through you. They might not be able to, but I see through you. So shut up. And there's a clip going around on the internet of where Michelle Yeoh scared Ariana so much in that scene that her contact popped out. Her contact literally pops out because she scared her so much, and we get one of the best images, I personally think, that really sums up the whole story of Wicked, where you get Glinda in that beautiful blue dress, the blue bubble dress, and she's sat on the propaganda of Elphaba, and I think that perfectly sums up the movie as a whole, all of the themes, but also the relationship between the two witches. So I felt really bad in the cinema because you know that shot where Chessery literally goes and picks up Dorothy and takes her to the castle. Oh my god, guys, I was laughing my head off. No, generally, when I say I was cackling, it and no one else was cackling. I was like, how is no one else finding this funny? This is fucking hilarious. But on the note of Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, I thought they did a really good job of almost kind of like distancing as much as they can the Wizard of Oz story in the film, because obviously you've got to reference it because it literally is like, you know, another side of that story. But they did a good job to not intrude on it too much, because one, you don't want to disrupt the idea and the vision that people have of the Wizard of Oz in their mind, but also you don't want to distract from Glinda and from Elphaba. It is, at the end of the day, it is the story of the two witches. It is the untold story of the Wizard of Oz. It's their story. It's not about Dorothy. So we didn't need to see Dorothy's face, and I'm really glad that we didn't. But I'm really glad that we get to see her picked up by Chessery and then thrown into the dungeon, because that was absolutely hilarious. Right, then going back to when I said that there are some people confused about the ending with the trapdoor, and how did Elphaba know what to do, and how did the Scarecrow know where to find her, all of that. Right, so this is where this becomes very important. Obviously, we see Glinda finally cracked, and she goes to the castle where Elphaba is. And we see her go to the castle where Elphaba is hiding out with Chessery and with the flying monkeys. This is the castle that Fiyero was referencing after As Long As You're Mine, where he was saying, I want you to go to one of my family's castles. There's underground tunnels. You will be safe. This is Fiyero's family castle, and the trapdoor that she hides in is the tunnel. And when we see Chessery come through with what I believe was a piece of Fiyero's clothing, and we believe in that moment that, from Glinda's perspective, that Fiyero is dead. But what Elphaba actually says is, we have seen his face for the last time, because he is now the Scarecrow. And while it's not explicitly said, I feel like you need to have a little bit of media literacy and fill in the gaps here for yourself, that on that piece of clothing, on that piece of parchment, whatever it was a plan of what they were going to do. There is enough setup throughout the film to believe that that is the gap that needs to be filled in. I don't need to know the ins and outs of how that plan was going to work, okay? I can forgive a few plot holes here and there. I can forgive a bit of, that's not realistic, that wouldn't have worked, when I get to see Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande perform for good. Suspend your disbelief and you'll see beautiful things. But For Good itself was actually so beautiful. Like, guys, I cried so much. I just generally was just full on blubbering. Like, from the second line, I had my head in both of my hands, just crying my eyes out. It's always been a song which I've just found so emotional. I know so many people do. So many people feel so connected to the musical and that song in particular. And I really just feel like they did such a beautiful job of delivering it. Like, I think after seeing them perform For Good, I don't understand how you're still confused at why they're crying in all their interviews. It's so emotional. It's so powerful. And the door scene afterwards, you know that was improvised, right? That was improvised, and apparently someone in the Universal team, whoever it was, wanted to cut it. They wanted to cut the door scene. I was like, excuse me? Second I saw it, I grabbed down. I was like, Doctor Who, Doctor Who! Such a beautiful moment, and I'm really, really glad they included it. But this is where we kind of get to the end of the movie, really. And obviously it's revealed that Elphaba has been under the trapdoor. The Scarecrow comes to get her and say, hey, it's time to go. They walk off into the sunset together. The Scarecrow's makeup, I didn't love it. I will be honest with you. I thought the Tin Man's makeup was so exceptionally done. And I spoke about before about how I thought Glinda and Elphaba, particularly Elphaba's makeup, was really well done to show the age progression in those 4 years between the two acts. But the Scarecrow's makeup, I just didn't gel with that. I know it was all real. It was no CGI. Not like CGI is inherently a bad thing, but they were clearly going for a certain theme or a certain aesthetic, a certain look that they wanted to be consistent. Yeah, and it was the one piece of makeup throughout the film that I just wasn't sure on. My friend said that Jonathan Bailey in the Scarecrow makeup looks like Matt Smith, and now I can't unsee it. I know some people said Ryan Reynolds. I think it's Ryan Reynolds. There's so many Ryans, I don't know. But my friend said Matt Smith, and now I can't unsee that. And we see the movie ending with Glinda finally creating good and overthrowing this fascist government, and actually finally gaining her powers. And they did something that they don't do in the stage play, and it does give it more of a happy ending, although I still think it's quite sad. Because when you think about it, Glinda is left on her own. She believes that her ex-fiance and her best friend, cough cough, lesbian lover, are dead. All her friends from university are also dead or gone to her. We don't know what happens to Boq after the film, but, you know, she has no one left around her. And when she sings, "The wicked lives are lonely," it's her. Her life is lonely, and yes, it is the consequence of her own actions. Like, by the end of the film, she is stepped into her goodness, and she's ready to be authentically good and be a good person, and not just let good be a word. But in terms of the people around her and the things that she's lost, it's too late. So yes, she might be able to create a good future for Oz, and she might actually generally be able to be a good, powerful witch, but it's too late to bring back the things that she's lost, and that is just the price. I think that is really sad, and I think Glinda is a brilliant cautionary tale. One, to not be inactive and not to just let yourself be a passive bystander. And two, to think about your power and your influence and where does it come from and what can you do with that to actually create change, not just make it look like you're creating change. But what I really loved in the film that they didn't do in the stage show was at the end of the movie where they're singing Finale, which I love Finale. It's so beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of music to end the story on. But what they do in the film, which they don't do in the stage show, is when they're singing this part of Finale, is we see Elphaba look back on Glinda as Glinda is singing, and the grimoire actually opens for her. Now, I interpreted this as the grimoire finally opens for Glinda, and she's able to read it because she actually steps into her power of being authentically good. She's actually ready to be good and not just be a figurehead. She's not just willing. She's willing and ready to do more than just be a figurative good, and that's why she finally gets her power. And it's a really good tale of how what you really want, because Glinda wanted to be magical throughout the whole film since she was a little kid when we got that flashback. What you really want will come to you when you are ready to accept it, and also when you are ready to use it for good, real good as well. And I saw some fans were able to transcribe as well what page the grimoire opened on, and apparently it was a spell to ease Glinda's fears and calm her mind, which is very Ariana Grande coded. Oh, and also the girl in front of me clearly hadn't seen the she clearly hadn't seen the musical The Stage Show, because when they opened up the trapdoor and Elphaba was actually alive in there, she generally went, "Oh!" Like the largest gasp I've ever heard in the cinema. It was generally fucking hilarious. But she was quite young, so I guess she probably hadn't been to see The Stage Show. And that's where our story ends. And you know what, guys? I really hope that is where the story ends. I know that there have been whispers around more movies and the Wicked 3 and blah, blah, blah. And I really just think, I hope that this is where we leave it. I really don't like this thing that happens in Hollywood, and it happens in every industry. When something is successful, they will milk it until the titties are... I was going to say something really visceral then, but they will milk it until the titties are red raw, you know? And I just think, let it be what it is. And one of the actors on Barbie, I can't remember who it was, they were saying that, like, a lot of people in Hollywood are taking the wrong lessons from Barbie. Barbie was such a success, so there's people in the industry now saying, oh, we need to make more films about dolls. And it's like, no, you don't need to make more films about dolls. You need to make more films for and by about women. And I feel like that's a powerful lesson to learn about Wicked here, is that I feel like it was just made with so much love and so much care by the people that were on the film. John M. Chu clearly cared about the project, but also having people who are so dedicated to the story, like Ariana Grande, like Cynthia Erivo, who really just gave it everything. I really think that is the lesson to be learned from this film. And the story and not shying away from the bold themes and making it connect with people in that way. I think that is what we learn from the success of Wicked. But this film, part 1 and part 2, and just all of the discussions around it have brought me so much joy. I really just love delving deep into things, I mean, just media in general, but things that I really enjoy, and it's so nice to be able to really enjoy things, isn't it? And I don't think it's a perfect film. I don't. I think there are things to criticise about it, and I think there's things they didn't get perfect, which, you know, a few of the things I've mentioned throughout this video, but as a whole, I think it's such a strong project and something that everyone who worked on it should be so proud of. But finishing with the final question, how are we chasing joy this week? I am chasing joy this week by, I'm actually going on the Christmassy day out with my parents, which is really, really cute. It seems to be a little tradition that we do now. We go to my favourite pub in Soho, which by the way is the Ganton Arms. It is, oh, they do the best fish and chips. It's, yum. Yummy, yummy, yummy. And then I think we're going to go Selfridges, look at some of the decorations, the workshop, and then we're going to go to the Winter by the River Christmas market, which is one of my favourite Christmas markets in London, because the flow, right, and this is going to sound like, just hear me out, guys, right? The reason that I love it is because the flow of foot traffic is so well organised. I know that sounds like the most 60-year-old like thing to say, but the flow of traffic at the Winter by the River Christmas market is so well organised, because I hate it when you go to Christmas markets and you kind of walk in this weird circle and you feel like there's not really, like, feels a bit crowded, everyone's kind of all bunched up. The way that this is organised is it's along the river from London Bridge to Tower Bridge, and there's plenty of room and it's kind of like a nice flow down the river. I love it. I get very overstimulated, and this is like the perfect flow of foot traffic for me. So I can't wait for that, but I would love to know in the comments. First of all, I'd love to know your thoughts on Wicked, your thoughts on my review, some of the things that I've said, particularly about like some of the disability changes and some of the things we spoke about throughout this episode. Yeah, let me know. And I'd also love to know how you're chasing joy this week. I'm going to wrap this episode up here. If you guys have liked this episode, don't forget to leave us a review. We love seeing what you think of the pod, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye!